Hello everybody, and welcome back to Gura. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say that I was going to have this out yesterday. However, my mother was sick. I'm not too sure what she has. It's either strep or something else. So, I was basically just helping her out that entire day. So, I never got time to record this and stuff like that. But I'm finally getting it done. I am actually really happy that I'm getting it done. Because tomorrow's Thanksgiving, and I think I want something else out by the time then. If y'all are seeing this on Thanksgiving, then there's probably going to be already another video out, but who knows, But let's go ahead and get right into what I really want to talk about in this episode and stuff like that. Alright, so basically, in this episode of Gura, we are leaving the oceans and saltwater biomes, and we're going to see what the freshwater biomes, like rivers, lakes, stuff like that, has in store for Gura. Now, Gura has changed a little bit over the millions of years that its existence. North Laura has finally separated from normal Laura. Mari Terra has a big split in it, dividing two continents. Now, Longa Terra has developed great rivers on its surface, and such like that. Now, Laura may very well collide with Mari Terra, but who knows, Ice caps have been growing and largely, so this means that Gura has been getting a lot colder and a bit more chilly, should I say, over the last couples of millions of years. We are past the Giran explosion event, and we are on a whole new era of Gura. So, let's go ahead and dive right in, shall we? So, most of these creatures will live in rivers, some will live in lakes, and blah 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 stuff. The first creature we're going to be looking at is Flumen Corpus. The Flumen Corpus is a very not too strange of a creature. These creatures resemble very much like aquatic worms. They slink around and mainly feed on decomposing matter or even plant matter, slowly feeding among things as they slip through the dirt and swim through the water. They are one of the first creatures to actually reach the rivers and freshwater biomes, besides things like plants. So they're going to offer a lot of new life, should I say, going into it within evolution and other things of the sorts. Keep an eye on these little worms. I think they will do just fine in these rivers. So, beautiful, beautiful river worms. Another type of worm bodies descendants have reached also the rivers. This is Dens Corpus. Dens Corpus is a very strange creature. These are basically Gira's equivalent of a leech, as they have two sharp teeth on the top part of their mouth. These teeth are designed to cut through flesh like a scissors, and once they have made that incision, they will then slurp up the blood, and then once they're filled up with the blood, they will then detach from the host and then sink back down to the bottom of the seabed. Now, or riverbed, should I say. And yeah, that's basically it. Females will mainly drink a lot of blood in order to produce eggs. So, you have that. Most of the time, when they're digesting, they are sitting at the very crevice of the rocks, usually on the riverbed or near plants. And then, once they're hungry, they will wait for creatures to swim above them. They will swim up, grab them with their teeth, and then just begin to drink their blood. And once they're full, they just repeat the cycle over and over and over again. So we have a very parasitic little guy just slurping up the blood and thriving as it does so. So, maybe they could evolve into lamprey-like creatures in the future. Who knows, The future has a bunch of secrets, as well as the past. So, what are some of these creatures that the den's corpus is going to be sucking on, mainly blood-wise? What are some creatures that they would be doing? Well, what could they be doing? Well, we'll have to look at some of the first bones descendants to find that out. This is Flumen interanitor. The Flumen interanitor is a very strange creature. They are descendant from the first bone, and it's basically its descendants and such. These creatures mainly spend their time swimming around in the rivers and doing stuff like that. And while they swim around in the rivers, they mainly feed on animal matter, plants, and basically whatever they feel like. So you have that for a strange creature. Now, these things are very similar to salmon, mainly in reproduction, but also in how they change their forms throughout multiple generations. Salmon will change their body and will move upstream of rivers and such. Similarly, these creatures, the Flumen interanitor, will also do the same thing. They will swim up the rivers and reproduce. Males change their colors in order to be more attractive to females when they do this. Males may develop somewhat of blue eye patterns around their head and then green spots around the base of the tail. They do this in order to impress females that they are the most colorful. Only the most colorful males usually get the female, and also the most, strong, as sometimes males will fight over females, and they'll let off a strange call before they brawl. Take a listen to that. And once they release this call, they will then attack each other. Before the males even fight, the males will also let off mating calls in order to attract a female to their presence. Take a listen to that as well. So yeah, these creatures make calls across the rivers and such during the breeding season when the males travel in the large schools to get upstream, as well as the females. And then the female, once she's chosen a male, she will then lay unfertilized eggs. The male will then fertilize the eggs. Once the eggs have been fertilized, the female will then carry the eggs that have been fertilized to a secluded spot in the river. And once they've been took into a secluded spot in the river, she will then die, as well as the male. So, when the eggs finally hatch, they have some food for when they hatch, their beginning larvae, in which they will then feed upon them. So yeah, these creatures are strange. But there's another creature that's even stranger than them strange alien salmon. This is the Lophus piscatorinus. This creature has developed a bright, beautiful mane. They are descendant from the bone shark and are a relatively small bone shark. Their mane is both males and females have pretty colorful manes. Females have these beautiful manes in order to appear dangerous, mainly to potential threats. And when a threat is approaching, they flare out their beautiful frill in order to scare off the potential threat or predator. Take a listen to the noise they make while attempting to intimidate the potential threat or predator. So yes, they let off this noise in order to scare off the thing that is threatening them, their life or their territory. However, similarly to the Flumen interanitor, these creatures have developed some sort of sexual dimorphism. The males have developed great broad manes. These manes have hard little circular balls attached to each of the thing, which are also made out of the same thing as their manes. These are active to impress the female. They will then shake their little manes, and the balls will clank against each other to make a sort of snapping sound, and it's very interesting. Take a listen to their beautiful mating calls. And then if the female believes that the mating call is the most beautiful and the mane is the biggest and most pretty, they will then mate. The female will then carry the eggs in her back paraffins and then carry them off. So yeah, you have these beautiful, beautiful shark-like creatures with beautiful manes. Now, the males, oftentimes, when they are larvae, will team up together. Females will do the same. Because the females actually do not work in packs and do not have a parental care instinct, unlike other bone sharks. So the females will leave. So the male larvae and the female larvae will team up together, and their siblings, basically, will all work together in order to hunt and forage. And then, once they are old enough, they will leave and then go find partners elsewhere and food elsewhere. Competition can get bad. Most of the larvae, however, will not make it, as there are terrifying predators that will indeed hunt them. What are some predators like down in these rivers? This is the Capillus turpis. The Capillus turpis is another descendant of the bone shark, mainly the open ocean bone sharks that have now migrated into these beautiful, beautiful oceans. Or, what?
Jordan, these are the rivers. These are not the oceans. Like, come on, bro. Are you that dumb?
Yeah, my bad. Well, these creatures are the apex predators of these rivers. Now, they don't exhibit pack hunting either, just like their tiny little cousins that they somewhat hunt sometimes. They have a very strong bite force, stronger than a lion's bite force, which is actually pretty crazy if you think about it, because these creatures are probably not as big as a lion. Maybe, somewhat. Now, these creatures, however, mothers will carry their egg sac just like their cousins, which are the Lophus piscatornis, and then will hatch out into larvae. The larvae will then, well, what do their larvae look like? Their larvae look like this. The larvae will then work together in order to survive, similarly to the mother. However, they will stay close to their mother somewhat and feed off of the scraps of her kills that she makes. So they somewhat learn from the mother, and as soon as they learn and work together with their other siblings, they will then be ready to leave each other and then go find their food elsewhere. The males of the species also work alone. However, sometimes they will fight each other and eat each other, which results into a sort of cannibalism among these creatures. And the males are actually, even though they sometimes eat each other, they are relatively docile, not really attacking many creatures. Females, however, are very aggressive, especially when they have egg sacs or larvae swimming around them trying to learn. She will be aggressive to any creature that comes near, and she will let off a deep hissing noise with their bristles. Take a listen to that. And this thick bristling noise is made to make sure that creatures that come near her larvae or eggs understand that she is a predator. Males will also exhibit mating calls in order to find females. When females are ready to mate, she will let off pheromones. The male will then follow the scent, and once he's finally ready to find the female, he'll let off his beautiful mating call. Take a listen to that. Now, what if the female thinks his mating call is good, he will then be able to mate with her. However, if she thinks it's bad, she will turn him away, and he'll have to go find his luck elsewhere. Sometimes the male will share his kills with the females just to get on her good side. So she's more than likely to say yes to him trying to mate with her. So you have these beautiful, somewhat beautiful creatures, the Capillus lurpus. And they are the apex predators of rivers and lakes. So watch out. I feel bad for these creatures, the flumen interturnator, because during their mating season, when they swim up the rivers to the shallow rivers, sometimes the Capillus turpis will be there, and it will be hungry. So, you have these beautiful, beautiful creatures that like to spend their days searching and foraging through the rivers. 2 bone shark descendants and 2 first bone descendants. It's sort of uneven. So, what's another first bone descendant that this guy will probably like to eat? It's this. This is the mandicar. The mandicar is a pretty cute looking creature. They have gray bristling hairs and a big bright head. Now, unlike the bone sharks, these guys actually exhibit pack hunting behavior. Pack hunting. These guys pack hunt? Oh yes, because though they are pretty cute, these creatures are more like piranhas, and that they have feeding frenzies and will strip animals to the bone if they're dead or even are injured to the point where bleeding a lot. These creatures will search for bleeding prey, and if they're dying with the big cut with blood, they will then eat the prey through the cut and throughout all the flesh, and even crack through bone, sometimes with their sharp razor teeth. In order to do this, they coordinate hunting strategies with their bristles. Take a listen to some coordinating strategies that these creatures use on each other. Now, once they've made these bristling coordinations, they'll be like, alright, it's my turn to go. Alright, now you go from this end, and he'll go from that end. Alright, now I'll go from this end, and you go over top. And then blah, 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 stuff like that. So, it makes them rather intelligent to work together in order to bring down prey, which is usually dying already. They will also scavenge on any dead animals that they can often be found here through leftover carcasses. However, they'll occasionally supplement their diet with Gura's river reeds that can be found here. So, you have these beautiful creatures that are similar to a piranha. Basically, Gura's equivalent of a piranha. Now, slowly moving through underneath the thick riverbed. This creature is the Fluminous Pes. These creatures are somewhat strange. These creatures are, of course, descendant from the squishy foot that live out in the open ocean. They are very similar to their open ocean ancestors, which are still alive and thriving. However, they live in rivers. And something interesting. Now, almost all creatures descendant from the tripod worms at this point in time have developed bristling-like hairs, whether that's for attracting mate, communication, or both. These guys don't have that. But why is that? Well, you see, they've internalized these bristling hairs and fused them with muscle tendons, creating a sort of thick muscle. These muscles are connected through bones within their throat, which can act for many attachments of vocal muscles. That's right, they've developed the first vocal muscles and can create complex sounds with just their voice. Take a listen. Now, that is very, very sweet from a strange little creature. Now, they've also developed their bristle stalks around their gills. They also are more keen to sense noises as predators could be lurking near. This is what one of their egg sacs look like. They lay their egg sacs near or underneath rocks or plants. And the egg sacs have a pretty decent amount of eggs within them, which will then hatch out into their tadpole-like larvae, which then will swim across the river, feeding on purplish algae and plant matter as well as dead decaying matter, then slowly, over time, growing into a large adult, so no parental care instincts. These creatures will also let out beautiful mating calls in order to attract a female. Take a listen to that. Quite beautiful, isn't it? From these beautiful, squishy feet. These creatures, sometimes, when they're being attacked by predators, will crawl up onto the riverbanks in order to escape potential danger caused by these said predators, mainly creatures like the Capillus turpis. So, they can survive, as them are the apex predators. However, sometimes, on rare occasions, they'll be picked off by large Lophus piscatornis. So, for these small little creatures, these creatures will have to thrive and evolve over time in order to survive with this beautiful, beautiful legs, which actually don't have bones in them yet, but don't worry, I'm sure they'll get there. Now, moving through the rivers again, you can find some more creatures. The turtur critter. The turtur critter is also descendant from the Guran turtles, which is a large group of the 4 stars descendants. Now, these animals have a large beak and actually are the first ones to develop internalized support structures within their fins. These internalized support structures allow them to swim more efficiently. They've also developed a lighter shell with less thick chitin, so they can actually move around. That's right, their shell's now made of chitin, not the harder material that is found in the others, ones that are out in the reefs and open oceans, allowing them to swim more efficiently and live through the rivers. So these creatures are a lot like sea turtles, especially on how they swim, which they use mainly their front pair of fins to just slowly glide through the river. And they mainly feed upon plants. Plants are mainly what their diet is, however, they'll supplement their diet with the occasional flumen corpus, as well as dead animals. Dead animals can also make up a good part of their diet. So, yes, you have these beautiful turtle-like creatures swimming around. They only use their back pair of fins for mating and holding their grubs. So, other than that, there's nothing much more to say about them. So these beautiful turtles-like creatures that are not even turtles really, because they only have support structures in the fins, not the entire body, are still thriving among the Gura. I'm sure some people out there would try to keep one as a pet. Me. However, sometimes they are preyed upon, of course, by creatures like the Capillus turpis. So, you have to watch out if you're a turtur critter. Now, moving on to some more descendants of the 4 stars. This is the Crac unigubutus. Very strange name. These creatures are very strange in that they somewhat resemble an earth crocodile. They developed long claw pinchers and a long crocodile-like beak. The reason for this is to slip into crevices of creatures that have been attacked and infected by the dens corpus, in order to pick them off while they're sucking their blood and then eat them. Their claws are used to help tear apart the flesh of the dens corpus and eat them. They mainly feed on dens corpus, however they'll even feed on plants. So these creatures are not the worst out there. They will also feed on decaying matter and sometimes the occasional flumen corpus. So they eat pretty much all of it. They don't eat live creatures unless you're a dens corpus or a flumen corpus, so you don't really have to worry. You can mainly find these creatures in shallower rivers, but you can also find them in deeper rivers, slowly hovering across with their transparent gliding fins as they skimmer across with their beautiful eyes. As you can see, the squishy crab's descendants are making it work. I wonder what their other descendants might look like in the open oceans or the deep sea. Who knows? Now, we have these beautiful creatures thriving within the water, but, I'm sure that if you were a dens corpus or a flumen corpus, you probably wouldn't like it. However, if you're a creature infected by a dens corpus, you probably want to kiss this guy because he's freeing you of a lot of pain from a creature drinking your blood with sharp teeth. So, you have this very helpful creature, the Krak-Unigbus. Now, another descendant of the 4 stars is a neotenous form larvae, which does not fall into adult. Thus, they have developed a first exoskeleton around their body. This exoskeleton provides them protection from potential threats, mainly creatures like Flumen interantur and Lophus piscatornis, which is a great help. This exoskeleton around their body, however, it sort of makes them resemble a lobster tail, which I can personally see it. These creatures use their 4 eyes in order to detect movement in the water, which is usually very murky. In order to detect predators and mainly prey, as these creatures will feed on the flumen corpus and even dens corpus, they will also feed on plants. So they actually have relatively keen vision, and even they can sense water currents with electromagnetic fields, allowing them to sense things, similar to some species of catfish. And then they sense their environment, and then just find local prey and plants and whatever they can find. They are prey, so they're not at the top of the food chain, of course, but they're not the very bottom. So the mainly creatures at the bottom are plants or even the flumen corpus. So, it's not a terrible life to be one of these creatures, as they move fairly quickly. However, if you're caught, it's pretty much game over. Better hope your shell is tougher than the rest, because most creatures that are attempting to attack them can probably crunch through their shell. However, creatures like the Flumen interantur may have trouble getting through it, as they do not have the strongest bite force. So, you just hope and pray if you're one of them. Well, these creatures would probably be good fishing bait. I'm not traveling to an alien planet to do so, though. But, yeah, you have these beautiful sea creatures, or river creatures, should I say, that are thriving. So let's talk about some plants, shall we? This is the Guran reed. The Guran reed is a type of aquatic plant that has developed thick, broad leaves. They resemble reed plants here on Earth, and they are similarly very stalky-like and are very beautiful. They mainly grow in deeper bits of the river. The river is pretty murky, so sunlight has trouble getting to them, so they've improvised by developing a darker pigment in order to absorb as much sunlight as they can through the low light frequencies. So, hey, these plants have it going for them, which is going to be pretty good for them. Sometimes the rivers, however, can get shallow, very shallow, because not much rainfall gets there. However, some rainfall will get here. So sometimes to the point it gets so low to the point where their leaves are sticking up out of there. And these are relatively short plants, so you know the river's low. That's how in that. So you have these beautiful Guran reeds, which make up the ecosystems of the rivers. So what other plants are thriving in these rivers and lakes of Gura? Oh, well, you got the underwater trees. This is the Guran river stalk. The Guran river stalk, or Guran river blossom, whichever one you want to, but I'm going to call it the Guran river stalk, or actually blossom. The Guran river blossom has developed thick and beautiful, puffy, like spore sac. They've grown a lot taller than their cousins out in the open oceans. This is because they need to get as much sunlight as they can, as they grow in pretty deep waters. they have developed spores that can freely move throughout the current and enter gametangias and other things to produce more. Well, they actually don't. Spores do not need to enter a gametangia. They just, once they reproduce via asexual reproduction. So you have that, and the spore will grow more of them, and yeah, it's basically one of these things for these creatures.
Jordan, you're an absolute idiot. Do I need to get out the George Foreman grill again? Huh?
But it's a beautiful plant, I would say. They are also, of course, the biggest plant in the rivers, so they're quite beautiful, aren't they? So they also provide ample shelter for many creatures that are out there, so you don't really have to worry about it too much, unless you're hiding underneath the leaves, because hopefully nothing can see you when you're hiding underneath the leaves. But most creatures on Gura have more than 2 eyes, usually 4 or even more eyes than that. So hopefully you stay hidden when you're hiding among these beautiful, beautiful river blossoms. Now, some segments of the river can get cut off for multiple reasons. However, this creates a lot of stagnant water. This stagnant water can create pretty much dead ecosystems for many creatures, so it makes it harder for creatures to survive. This mainly occurs in swamps and stuff, developing a lot of purple algae, which prevents a lot less oxygen around the deep parts of the water, so you are probably going to die via suffocation underwater, which is crazy. So it's gonna be kind of hard for creatures to survive, except for some. Some have developed and adapted to this. This is the scythe root lily. The scythe root lily is a very strange plant that often grows in stagnant water. And you would probably think that a plant wouldn't do so good if it grew in stagnant water, besides stuff like the purple algae. However, they have developed a solution. While creatures will oftentimes get trapped in the stagnant water, they'll probably try to escape and other things. And some creatures can involuntarily get themselves trapped in it. And then their tangling roots, which originally were used to suck up nutrients. However, since purple algae, stuff like that, and lots of bacteria get into the stagnant water, they can't get as much nutrients. So they've improvised. Instead of gathering nutrients from the water, them sharp leaves at the very bottom gather nutrients from flesh instead. They will wrap around potential prey that struggle too much, and then will stab them with their sharp leaves, and will inject enzymes into their body, and then slurp up the nutrient soup. And sometimes the stagnant water can get broken, and these guys will go out into rivers. However, this is even better, as rivers are perfect, because most of the plants get their nutrients from the seabed. Not too many nutrients are just riveling through the rivers. So, they will still be using their carnivorous diet as many times they get flowed down into a stagnant part. And then they store all the juice and energy in a tuber at the very bottom of the leaf. This tuber is very nice. The reason these plants can stay buoyant is due to them having specialized gases in their leaves in order to help them stay somewhat buoyant, but however, the tuber can help them sink, so it gets them at just the right level at the top of the water, and has their dangling, sharp, killing roots to attempt to stab and drain the life of many types of creatures. Well, many creatures that get stuck in the stagnant water. However, one creature attempts to survive through these terrifying plants. These plants are basically like sunnydews. So, how could a creature survive a sunnydew? Well, some creatures can already survive a sunnydew. So, how can some creatures survive this scythe root lily? What creature could even do that? It's this guy. The codex hopper is a very strange creature. In fact, these creatures are similar to frogs and can oftentimes be found hopping from scythe lily to scythe lily, slowly jumping on them. They do this in order to survive and escape from predators that might attempt to attack them. And another reason. These creatures know that sometimes flesh can get stuck on the tangling roots of the Gura scythe lily. So they will swim down there and clean off the roots. However, this can be pretty risky as the roots will attempt to slowly wrap them up and stab them. So they are actually relatively quick in the water. They will also, however, they're not too good with cleaning these plants, as they'll also feed on the scythe lily tuber. They will swim down there, eat the scythe lily tuber, like tear off a strip of it and eat it, then swim back up and just rest and digest the strip that they've eaten, and then go back down and just keep doing that and doing that until the scythe lily eventually dies, because it cannot regrow a tuber. And, well, then they eat the whole entire plant and then move on to a new body. Due to them also eating the flesh of creatures that are stuck, these creatures are omnivores and have made it really nice to survive among this. They developed tiny little sensing organs around their feet that can actually allow them to hear. So, in order to communicate with the others of their kind, they clip their beak with super fast velocity in order to communicate. Take a listen to that. So yeah, they communicate in vast little clips and snaps in order to just talk to each other, which is quite nice. It's similar to other creatures on, well, Gura's rivers. I wonder if these creatures, since they're already somewhat semi-aquatic, could they go on land? Who knows? You know? So, yeah, the codex hopper is a very cute creature. I just want to have one as a pet. They're so cute. And, well, yeah, the codex hopper is basically Gura's frogs. How fun is that? And that's gonna be it for today's episode of Gura. Now, okay, this episode is maybe a little shorter than the other ones, but you know what, guys, it's okay. I'm almost done with the next episode, so the next episode shouldn't be too long to get out. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and be sure Gordon, oh my god, bro, you were supposed to do 2 biomes, bro. 2 biomes. Oh, that's right. I needed to do 2 biomes post today, didn't I?
You made a community post. Oh, the community post,
yeah. Yeah, 2 biomes. Oh, yeah. Okay, guys, we're not done yet. We have to still discover 2 other biomes. What other biomes is there to cover, Jordan? I mean, we really covered all of the ocean, except for the deep sea. But we can't just go from fresh water to the deep sea, right? Because somebody already did that. Except they did in reverse, deep sea to fresh water. So, what are we doing? What other biome can we cover? Well, the next biome, or entire ecosystem that we'll cover right now, is dry land. Land is the next opportunity for Guran organisms on this beautiful planet. As you can see here, life has thrived on land, all starting from a strange fish that just like, you know what, this ocean, it's too much stress for me. I'm going to leave and I'm going to grow on land. Thank you. And you know what? That's why you and I are here today, because of this fish. He's your great-great-grandfather. So you need to, like, kiss him on the lips or something, because you're the reason why we're not freaking little fish in the sea. And, well, Gura is also going to have a similar thing, where creatures go up on land. So let's look at some creatures that go up on land. Well, first up, we gotta do plants, guys, so no animals first. Plants always go on land first, guys. Trust. This is, of course, the first plant we really talked about in Gura episode 1. This was one of the first plants. And it's still thriving, and it's going to be the first one to grow on land. This is the heart This is the purple heart plant. The purple heart plant is going to be the first plant to spread its roots and its spores on to dry land. Now, since it's going to be dotting, it probably won't even really need to change all too much. Instead, just embedding its roots into the hard rock and then just surviving. And due to the overabundance of roots moving and pushing through the soil, it makes soil. So soft dirt is now on Gura instead of hard rock and sand. And since these plants are now on land, lots of oxygen is now going to be pumped into Gira's atmosphere, almost to the point where it's almost like the Carboniferous period on Gira so far. These plants can also sometimes infect other plants with their roots, so they are sort of a plant/fungus. So they're sort of a mix between the two. Like, it's really strange. And they have developed male and female gametangia to meet with gametes, which the gametes form a spore, so these guys reproduce via spores similar to moss or liverworts, which these plants are more closely to liverworts. However, they're now kind of like a fungus plant, so cool. And they will provide great boosts in the ecosystem for life among Gira. However, while these poor little worms, these poor little creatures, the flumen corpus, they have been eaten, and all they want to do in the rivers is just clean it up. But they still get eaten. Like he said, they just can't thrive. It's like they're literally earthworms. So some may start to crawl on land due to the abundance of plants that are starting to grow up there, and the soft soil. The soft soil is almost like thick, soft mud. It's kind of like what they have down the rivers. Soft enough for them to slither and crawl under, like an earthworm. The soil is also nice and moist, enough for them to survive with their skin. Land might actually provide an opportunity for these creatures. As they breathe through their skin, the soft, moist soil will allow them to survive underground. So these creatures may very well become Gira's earthworm. This is the luteum corpus. The luteum corpus is basically Gira's earthworm. They have developed 3 light-sensing organs around the base of the head in order to detect light and see if potential threats are near, or mates, as they don't have threats yet. They mainly feed among roots / mycelium of the heart lilies, and they lay their eggs in the soft, wet soil, which hatch out into their larvae, and then they grow into adults. They also feed on dead plants, and it creates just soft soil. And so far, it's doing wonders for the ecosystem for these creatures to go on. It's like introducing earthworms to your garden. It can make it better due to it just helping the soil and other things of the sorts. So these creatures were the first animals to go on land and were thriving ever since. So what are some animals that might change that? Well, what are some animals that might change that? How about plants first, before we get into the animals? Some of the river blossoms may also start to find an opportunity on land. Since they're already tall and can often be found near riverbanks or lake banks, this could be a good opportunity for them, as they're already tall and pretty structurally sound in order to survive upon land. Thus delving into Purpa arbora. Purpa arbora is basically the first Giran tree. These beautiful trees are the tallest plant on Gira. Rightfully so. And similarly, the reason why they're classified as trees and not just very tall land plants is because they have developed a thick, woody trunk, similar to earth plants. So Giran wood will now exist, except it probably wouldn't be brown. It will probably be a grayish purple color, which is pretty cool looking wood if you ask me. The way these plants reproduce is very similar to the purple heart lily. Now, These plants have multiple female gametangia. Around 5, including the branches, which also have female gametangia. The male branches are the male gametangia, which sometimes grow out from the bottom as segments in the roots. These puff out the male gametes. The female gametes are stored within the blossoms and release chemical responses that attract the male gametes, which then go inside of the female spore blossom. And then they join together and form a spore. These spores are then puffed out, and then the spores can land on the dirt and grow a new tree. So these plants reproduce very similarly to plants on Earth that reproduce with spores. And it's very similar to how ancient plants around during the Devonian Carboniferous didn't really have seeds until real later. They reproduced via spores. And these plants will do pretty much the exact same thing. And since of this reproduction, they can be found all across the vast swamps and can grow pretty much everywhere. These relatively tall trees just growing and thriving within the swamps. And these codex hoppers may see an opportunity within this. They already are somewhat semi-aquatic, and slowly some might start to hop on land instead of the scythe lilies, and may start to feed on the purple heart lilies and even other things, like fallen leaves of the purple arbora and stuff like that, which is crazy. It's funny. They also might feed on the luteum corpus. In order to do this, they may develop a land lifestyle, developing thick leathery skin in order to survive outside of the rivers. They also might develop thick leathery egg sacs in order to contain their larvae to be safe. And also, the main thing, they may develop lungs. This is their lungs. Their lungs are 2 sacs, similar to ours, and absorb oxygen and release carbon dioxide, which is very similar to an Earth organism. Gura organisms are also carbon-based and rely on water and oxygen to breathe. Now, they've also developed thick, fibrous muscles around each part of the lung. These muscles contract and expand. When they expand, it sucks in oxygen. And when they contract, it releases oxygen, or carbon dioxide, due to them how they breathe. So these will actually breathe very similarly to Earth vertebrates, even though they don't have bones. So they won't be able to get as big as our Earth organisms, but still, they can get fairly big due to their pretty efficient breathing, and they don't have an exoskeleton either. So where would this breathing put them in? Or not even breathing, just their body plan. Would it put them in amphibians, reptiles, mammals, fish, birds? No, it'd probably put them in a mix between amphibian and arachnid, because these guys might fill some niches like that. Spoiler alert. Now, what is their first descendant going to look like? This is Tuberostreum. Tuberostreum is their first descendant, and it is completely herbivorous, feeding among the heart lilies and fallen leaves of the purple arbora. Once they feed on these plants, they will also lay the eggs in the dirt, which hatch out into their grubs, which then go in the dirt and feed among the roots of plants, and then will cocoon and then grow into adults. They breathe through tiny little holes located on their head, and they will also hear and sense vibrations via their feet. So these guys will be able to hear other feet. Now, you can often find these cute little herbivores scuttling across with their big, bulky bodies, just scuttling across the floor, looking for their next meal or partner, or looking for a nice place to stay. They've developed thick, leathery skin, allowing them to survive. And since these creatures are ectothermic, you can often find these creatures basking on rocks similar to a reptile, which is kind of cute for these little guys. Now, they might develop warm-bloodedness. We're not too sure. But they're kind of cute. And they keep the plant population down to where the plants don't overgrow into a thick jungle. So it's still somewhat safe yet. And at first, they didn't have to worry about much and just reproduced and ate. However, predators eventually arrived. Thus, they had to adapt. Except the predators adapted too. What are some predators to these small little bulky guys? It's this. Digitus sciaticus is their predator. This predator has developed thick chitinous armor internally within their digits, allowing them to somewhat attack. But how would they attack with those measly little fingers? Well, these guys have thick muscles and thick hydraulics within their leg, allowing them to rear up on their hind legs like a horse, and then slam back down with their sharp inner digits to stab into the flesh of the prey, which is usually the tuberostreum. And once they do this, they will then slice through them with their thick claws, which usually pin them down, and then finish the job with their sharp beak. They lie in wait, hiding beneath plants, and wait for an unsuspecting prey, usually a tuberostreum, to slowly cross their path. And once that happens, it's pretty much game over for the guy who is getting torn apart. This makes them deadly predators. They've also developed leathery skin, a leathery egg sac to contain their grubs, and also breathe through similar lungs and hear with their feet. So, that's kind of nice, isn't it? And similarly, you can find them basking among plants in order to stay hidden as much as possible. You won't find them on rocks, but plants. However, the tuberostreum are brown, so you can find them among brown plants or even just the soil. So, you have these beautiful creatures. When they are grubs, they will also feed on plant roots and basically scavenge off of anything, and also luteum corpus. So even though the luteum corpus attempted to leave the rivers to survive and get away from predators, they have now got predators. So you have these predators. But who's to clean up the scraps of the kills that these creatures make? Who is that? It's this guy. This guy is your janitor. Is Rostrum carnis punitridae. Rostrum carnis punitridae is a pretty scavengerous creature. They also hear with their feet and breathe through the similar lungs, and have developed leathery skin. They're closely related to the predators, which dominate these, the Digitatus stechidus. So, they basically just clean up the measly scraps of flesh left over by creatures. Mainly the predators, of course. And when they're grubs, they will feed among pretty much also the same sort of thing. Roots and such, and luteum corpus. Poor luteum corpus. And they have pretty keen vision and a keen sense of smell, which is near their lung holes, which have developed bristles that have cells that can depict chemical responses, so they can smell with the same holes that they breathe out of, which is similar to humans, as they can smell, well, with their noses, and we can breathe through our noses. It makes sense, right? And once they find prey, or scavenging off of carrion, they will eat it with their sharp beak, which is very nice. You can often find these creatures either hiding beneath rocks or on top of small rocks basking due to them being ectothermic. You can also find them just living their life, feeding among dead flesh. Very nice. We should join them. And yeah, the 4 Stars descendants, mainly the Codex Hopper's descendants, are doing fairly well on land as of now. How about this guy's descendants? That's right, these beautiful, beautiful creatures, the Fliminus pesci, are also going to live their beautiful lives on land. They already have legs. However, the problem with their legs is that they don't have bones in their legs. They just have thick muscles. So how would they survive? It's simple. Adapt your ribs into a type of bone that can hold leg bones, and then adapt some bones into leg bones, and then crawl on land. And that's exactly what they did. But they also adapted this. This is lungs, derived from their gills. And these thick lungs develop through a stalk around the head, which then leads into the 2 pairs of lungs. The 2 sacs of lungs are compressed and decompressed using muscles that pump them, which allows them to breathe in and breathe out, similarly to the vertebrates and also the Codex hopper's descendants. So they also breathe in and out. However, their breathing is a bit different than Earth, like many Earth animals, and that the respiratory system is very similar to birds, and that around the lungs are these tiny little air sacs. These air sacs allow them to store fresh oxygen within the lung when they're exhaling, thus allowing a continuation of fresh oxygen all around their body. So they breathe fairly good, allowing them to survive on land for a pretty long time, just surviving and just living, which is nice. So, over time, within developing bones in their legs and developing these lungs, they are freed to colonize land. And thus resulting into this. The Pis planus is the first creature to finally make it, or, well, the first descendant of the riverfoots to finally get onto land. These creatures have developed, well, their gill arches, which are now their nostrils basically that lead into the lungs, are now on their face, and also can smell very similar to the Codex hopper's descendants. However, they don't hear with their feet. Rather, they hear with their antennae, which is very interesting. And, well, yes, they developed bones that can hold the leg bones, and now developed leg bones. So, yeah. They have developed thick, big bones in their legs made out of thick calcium, allowing them to live. So they get much of their diet from calcium. So you'll find these creatures, though they are herbivores, chewing and eating on bones and bone marrow to help make sure that their bones are nice and tough. These creatures, however, you will not find them basking out there like the Codex hopper's descendants, as they are very amphibious, these poor little Pis planus. And they will feed among things like maybe heart lilies and also leaves that have fallen from plants like the purple arbora. Now, like amphibians, they of course have to go in the water to moisten their skin. So you can often find these guys just chilling on the riverbanks, eating the plants that grow near the riverbanks while just sitting there. Now, since they have developed vocal cords, they can develop thick and beautiful communication. Take a listen to that. So yes, they have pretty cool communication styles, which is very nice. Now, how can they hear really out of their antennae? Most antennae are used to sense vibration, so how can they hear out of theirs? Well, it's simple. These were originally used to push water into the gills, but now they've developed a lot differently. So how are they going to do it? Well, it's simple. These tufts of hair around the tips of the antennae gather vibrations and frequencies within the antennae, which then travel through a hollow duct down to the eardrum. The eardrum will then feel the vibrations of the noise and detect frequencies and different shapes that it causes. So it can hear sounds very similar to a normal Earth vertebrate. They've also developed specialized organs around the tips similar to an Earth animal's ear, so these guys can hear, and pretty well too. So hearing has evolved on these guys, as well as the Codex hoppers with their feet. So it's very nice. They've developed their long, thicker trunk upper lip or jaw in order to just pluck plants, just scoop them up like a shovel with their thick teeth that have developed and evolved. They're somewhat cute. And similarly to frogs, they have to go in the water and lay their egg sacs, which then hatch out into the tadpole-like larvae. So, you have these beautiful creatures. These beautiful creatures known as the Pisplanus. That sounds like I'm saying a bad word. Piss. Now this is the Acutioris. The Acutioris is a very close cousin of them, except instead of diverging and evolving into be a herbivore, it is a predator, as its name quite literally translates to sharp mouth. They have developed sharp little feet, and they are very fast, somewhat galloping like a crocodile across, thus resulting in them having a semi-sprawled posture in order to run, unlike their Thespanus cousins, which have a sprawled stance. These guys can chase prey outside of the water and then run back into the water due to them having amphibious-like skin. They can also hear out of their antennae. And similarly to the Pisplanus, they have developed bones within their legs. Now, these guys have so far both developed 8 limbs. This may change in the future. Who knows? Blah, 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 blah. So, yes, it's very nice for these guys to have their little limbs made out of thick calcium bones. So you can also find them chewing on the bones of the prey that they have recently killed and eaten. Which is very nice. You know what these creatures remind me of? You want to know what they remind me of? They remind me of the Earth's ancient amphibians that used to kill and eat basically everything. That's what they remind me of. Maybe they're very similar. What do I mean they're very similar? They actually are very similar. Gura is kind of similar to Earth. But don't worry. That's going to change in the future. Very much so. So yeah, we have beautiful herbivorous amphibian spider creatures and carnivorous ones, and tiny little boys with beaks running around. It's beautiful, isn't it? Now, back to these beautiful creatures that have been somewhat dying now recently within the undergrowth of the dirt and stuff. The luteum corpus. While some will stick to their earthwormous diet and body plan, some may start to crawl out under the dirt. In order to support this, they may develop spiracles to breathe out of, and limbs to walk on, and something to protect their soft, squishy skin. Thus evolving into this. The externus corpus is a very cool creature, should I say. They have developed their light-sensing organs into full-on eyes in order to see. 3 eyes in order to see, and have developed strange body plan. They have developed spiracles on each segment of their body in order to breathe. These spiracles take in oxygen, and we'll talk about the respiratory system in a bit, because it's a bit different than what we've been talking about of the other organisms. These creatures very much so resemble an earth centipede. And similarly to earth centipedes and other invertebrates on Earth, they breathe through spiracles. These spiracles take air to a pair of book lungs. These book lungs sort of absorb the oxygen into their blood. So, you have that. You have these guys breathing similarly to an insect and other invertebrates and arthropods on Earth. Now, due to them having an exoskeleton and not having lungs like an Earth vertebrate and stuff like that, they are probably not going to get as big as any other creature. Instead, they're probably going to stay around the size of a normal Earth insect. However, oxygen levels are growing, so we might find our own version of the Guran carnivorous, where these guys are large and dominant, like how Earth arthropods were. Who knows, though? That may not happen. But yeah, you can find these guys sculling across, feeding on carrion plants and waste. And then they lay their eggs in the dirt, hatch out into their larvae, which do not have an exoskeleton, and so they go in the dirt, feed on the roots, metamorphosize, grow an exoskeleton, and boom, you have these externus corpus, which are probably going to lead up in some, small, probably cool things in the future. I will say, the 2 bodies have come a relatively long way. Now, there's probably going to be life on top of the trees. Now, life among the trees. What would it be like? Well, we already have wood-like trees on Gura, the purple arbora, so what would life be like in the trees? Let's take a look. Well, prey and predators most creatures will probably escape onto the purple arbora to escape from predators like this, the sharpmouths, which are lethal and predatory. I should call them by their scientific name, the Acutioris. So, they're going to start climbing trees. Well, of course, some creatures are going to start climbing trees to escape them. Like this, the scutum. The scutum, I'm going to go ahead and say it, translates to shield. Now you might be wondering, why is this creature called shield? It's because this guy has scales. Scales are strange. These scales help them absorb more light from the sun and also help them have less dehydration resistance. So they are not like amphibians. They're more like earth reptiles. Mainly things like lizards, as they share a similar body plan. Somewhat. Now, since they do not crawl down from the trees, instead they spend almost their entire life in the trees of the purple arbora, they do not climb down to lay their egg sacs into the water to hatch out into their tadpole-like larvae. Instead, they have developed their last pair of limbs into a sort of structure that can hold the eggs of the creatures, the embryos that they have. Now, an embryo sac has usually around 4 yolk. The 4 yolk have usually around 2 females in the egg sac and 2 males in the egg sac. And then these egg sacs, of course, powerfully grow the beginning babies in it. And since they hatch out not as larvae, but sort of as offspring, we won't call their babies larvae. We'll call them either grubs or offspring. Which one do y'all want? Leave it down below. Grubs or offspring. Now, when these grubs or offspring hatch out from the egg, the mothers will ditch them. The mother will ditch them. The mother will then ditch them and go somewhere else on the tree or go to a new tree entirely. Like, they can jump from tree to tree because they grow that closely. So, these offspring or babies will basically just work together in order to hunt for food and eat plants and just survive until they get big enough and become an adult, and then they go find their own tree and establish their own territory and for mating. These creatures also produce mating calls in order to attract females and to basically mating calls. Take a listen to their beautiful calls. It's pretty beautiful, isn't it? From these strange Guran lizards. They also have the most keen sense of smell on Gura's land and the most keen hearing. So it's pretty hard to sneak up on one with their senses, which are very good senses. Now, other arboreal creatures that have been thriving is the rostrum arboris. The rostrum arboris is basically a tree-dwelling descendant of, well, what are they descendant of? Well, of course they're descendant from the rostrum carnis punetridae, which you can just tell it by their looks. They have developed recurved claws, allowing them to climb through the thick bark of the trees. They also have one of the most keenest eyesight of any codex hopper's descendants at all, in order to see across through the trees and see potential predators like the scutum are coming by, or potential prey like baby scutums or thick patches of leaves and or spore blossoms. So these guys have keen sense of vision. They lay their egg sac, which is very leathery, inside of a tree branch that they use to carve in through their beak. The larvae will then use their muscular beaks and forelimbs in order to eat wood. That's right, their larvae will eat wood, and develop specialized the 2 stomachs that they all have in order to squeeze out as much nutrients as they can from the poor wood. And then they grow and grow into these arboreal old adults. So, yeah, Gura has two arboreal, beautiful creatures that have now decided to become arboreal. I believe that these two creatures may lead into some cool creatures in the near future. Who knows, you know? I mean, unless you're a time traveler, you won't know. So, yeah. Mariterra and Longiterra have all of these animals and all of these plants. And this guy, however, is on both. He wasn't done. His prey was leaving him. Or her. Or it. They, them. So it wants to adapt to them. So it starts to adapt. It flips itself over in order to survive on land. Why would something flip itself over to survive on land? Why would they do that? And how would they do it? Well, they turn into this, the gluttonous bulbous. In order to survive on land, some of the scythe lilies have adapted, fusing some of the roots together into two long tendrils that produce a smell like rotting meat. This rotting meat-like smell attracts prey into their sticky leaves that wrap you up like a sunnydew plant, and sharp bristles that stab into you and drain your fluids, like their ancestors. However, their bulb, which is now the entire front, which originally the lily part, has also been developing. This bulb has also developed roots at the very bottom, and the bulb just stores the energy and stuff like a tuber. So, these carnivorous plants are thriving among Gura's swamps, mainly feeding on creatures like these guys. These beautiful, beautiful creatures, which are actually, don't tell anyone, my favorite. The Rostrum Carnis Punitridae. They're my favorites. They're so cute. And also, these poor guys, the Externus Corpus. They'll also feed on them. They're my second favorite. So, yeah, they'll feed among these poor creatures as they are attracted to the smell of rotting meat. Now, all of these plants and animals are located on Mariterra and Longiterra. However, Laura and North Laura, the only creatures that they have or organisms they have are the heart lily and, well, what else do they have? Let me look at my list here. They also have luteum corpus. So, are those going to be the only things that live on Laura and North Laura? No. Some Turtur critter may start to adapt. They already have sort of internal support structures within their fins in order to help them swim more efficiently. So, could they adapt that into a way to live on land? Of course they can. Because there's no competition on land on Laura and North Laura. So they may very well adapt on top of Laura. Thus evolving into this, the Testudo alta. The Testudo alta is a very beautiful creature. Also one of my favorites. They have developed segmented shells, allowing for more flexibility on their back. And since they've developed more flexibility on their back, and when they were still Turtur critters in the river, they had internal support structures with inside their fins, their large fins, and which have now become their tall legs, which has led into them having bones made out of calcium and a mix of chitin and calcium, similarly to the tripod worms descendants. They've also developed a slab of bone on their chest area in order to support the lower bit of the body, and developed a bone-like tail in originally their back pair of limbs, which have now become a two-part tail-like structure. Now, since them fins no longer help them swim or mate, well, they actually still do help them mate. Females also use it to carry their vulnerable egg sac and grubs, which we'll be calling their larvae grubs. Their grubs, these creatures are pretty parental care instinct. They've also developed lungs and such, and also hear with their feet, similar to their codex relatives on Mari and Longaterra. So they're pretty similar, except they don't look similar. They look very strange. And since they have developed parental care, developing and protecting their vulnerable grubs, as they walk across the plains, they feed among the abundance of plants and meat that they can find out here. That's right, cannibalism sometimes. So they'll also chew on the bones with their thick beaks. Inside of the egg sac, there are 3 eggs. Usually, however, only 1 grub or maybe even 2 grubs will hatch, due to the beginning growing larvae inside of the egg sac eating each other and then hatching out. So usually only 1 hatches, however, 2 is rare, however, it's not unheard of. The grubs are shellless and don't have strong support structures within their body, so the parents will then protect them and adapt and help them, and then watch them as they metamorphosize and grow into adults. And they'll be able to take care of themselves as they walk across the thick valleys of Laura and North Laura, as these creatures are the dominant life form on that. I cannot wait to see what their descendants take, which is going to be different from the ones that don't exist on Mari and Longaterra. I wonder what will happen. And basically, guys, that's it for this episode. I actually had a lot of fun enjoying this video. So, this is also the longest video of Gura to date, an hour long. I hope you enjoy, and, I had really fun making this video. So, I hope you enjoy, and, well, goodbye, guys. Happy Thanksgiving.